Good evening and welcome to the Upper Harbor Terminal Draft Coordinated Plan Open House. This is the second open house of two. It's January 5th, 2021. We're here with the project team and city staff and some consultants to walk through the coordinated plan and answer some questions. If I can get the next slide, please.
Good evening and welcome to the Upper Harbor Terminal Draft Coordinated Plan.
If I could ask people to, while they're signing in, if they could mute their lines, if they're not talking, I appreciate it. All right, next slide, please. Okay, as you are seeing, this is an online live event. Attendees have an opportunity to submit questions to the presenters. You'll see a question and answer submission area on this device. So for both web and mobile versions, please do try and sign into the live event if you can. It's the best way to submit questions. We are recording this and it'll be available on the project website. We also recorded the first of these open houses, which is available on the city's YouTube page as well. And again, we encourage you to participate via the live link to ask questions. Next slide, please. Next, okay. Okay, how to ask a question. On the web version, you will ask a question, use the Ask the Question button, which will be in the lower corner of the window. You can submit a question and go to the project team, and at any point during this presentation you can submit a question. We'll be collecting those. We have some staff that are behind the scenes that are putting them into a spreadsheet and ordering these things. You can also ask questions anonymously by checking the box Ask Anonymously, and we will be publishing these questions through the Q&A panel on this site, and we will also be publishing these after the fact with answers. And then on the mobile version, select the Q&A tab on the upper right-hand side of the screen to do and follow the same steps to ask a question. So next slide, please. Okay, let's get into the meat of the presentation tonight. We're going to do a little introductions of the project team and of all of the speakers. We'll talk about the project's background and the process up to today, and then go through the draft coordinated plan and the elements that you'll see in there. And then we think that'll take about an hour, and then we'll be answering some questions. Like I said, we'll be publishing the questions that we are answering that we have, and we might not be able to answer all of the questions that we get today, but those will also all be published to the project website, which is upperharbormpls.com. That's upperharbormpls.com, which is where we have all the information about this project, including the draft coordinated plan, all of the concept plan, and all of the background materials. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Take this time to introduce myself. My name is Eric Hanson. I'm the city's Director of Economic Policy and Development. I'm the sponsor of this project on the city side, and we have a number of people from our collaborative planning committee and development team, and then our infrastructure team, and our co-chair for the collaborative planning committee, which is a group of folks that have been working with us for almost 2 years now. To help mold the concept plan into the coordinated plan is Markella Smith, and Markella is on the phone, so I'm going to give her a moment to unmute herself and then ask her to introduce herself, and then we'll go around the horn for all of the other project things. So Markella, thank you for being here.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for having me, you guys. I am Markella Smith, the co-chair of the UHT CPC, also the executive director at McKinley Community, and I am thankful to be here. If y'all have questions for me specifically, don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, let's move on. Hilary.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Hilary Holmes, and I work for the City of Minneapolis in the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development in the Economic Development Division, and I work on the Upper Harbor Terminal Redevelopment Project and staff the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee.
Joanna?
I'm Joanna Hicks. I work for Element Commercial Real Estate, and I am the consultant for project management to the City of Minneapolis.
Brandon?
Yep, I'm Brandon Champeau, Senior Vice President and Market Leader here in the Twin Cities for United Properties, and have been on this project since we were selected as part of the development team back in 2016.
Thank you, Brandon. Nathan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Brandon. Nathan Koster, Transportation Planning Manager here in Public Works, and I'll be the lead for the planning and preliminary design for public infrastructure.
Thanks, Nathan. Alexander?
Hello, everyone. Waiting for the video to come on. Hi, I'm Alexander Cato with Transportation Planning. Working very closely with Nathan. I'm leading the engagement piece for the public realm and infrastructure.
Thank you, Alexander. And Lissa?
Hi, I'm Lissa. Hi, I'm Lissa Washington. I am a project manager with Formula, and we are working along with a team of consultants that are working along with Alexander and Nathan. Happy to be here tonight.
All right. Thank you, Lissa. Before we get to the next part, I just want to remind everybody that we have questions and answers. You can ask questions all through this this presentation, so please do not hesitate to ask them, and at the end we'll get back to that. And so let's get to the meat of the presentation, and I'll pass it off now to Hilary Holmes.
Good evening again. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about the project and the process to date. So if we could advance to the next slide. For those that are not familiar, the Upper Harbor Terminal site is located in the McKinley neighborhood in North Minneapolis. The overall site is 48 acres made up of multiple parcels of land, and it takes up about, it is about a mile of riverfront north to south on the Mississippi River. The site is intersected by Dowling Avenue, which currently doesn't go all the way to the river, and then on the southern end, 33rd Avenue North. And then some of the parcels are adjacent to Interstate 94, as you'll see at Dowling and 94. There are some landmarks noted on this as well. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is to help, again, orient those that may not be as familiar with the site, to show the geography of the site, location, and some of the surrounding uses. Next slide, please. This is another view of the site. I think it's helpful to be oriented to downtown from North Minneapolis. You can see the riverfront there, the Mississippi River, again, the power plant that's across the river on the east bank there. And then the extent of the site with some of the existing uses and structures on the site. You can also get a feel, I think, also for the surrounding land uses and then the presence of Interstate 94. Thank you. Next slide. These are some photos of the existing structures I mentioned and existing conditions. The site previously operated as a barge shipping terminal. Those operations ceased when the lock was closed to barge traffic and upstream or upriver navigation at the end of 2014, or I believe the lock closed in 2015, but the barge shipping operations ceased in 2014. At that time, in 2015, redevelopment planning, the current phase of redevelopment planning that we're in, began. Those structures are still on site. There's still activity on site these days. It's mainly used for outdoor storage, and there are a few different tenants on site that use it for that. Next slide, please. There's a little more about planning context on this page. I had mentioned the current redevelopment planning phase. So in 2015, the current redevelopment planning phase began. Previous to that, there have been multiple years and decades of planning work done around the site to envision another future, another use for the site. At the, there are a couple of different plans that overlay on the site as well. And then next slide, please. Thank you very much. This is the engagement timeline. So again, I had mentioned in 2015 with the visioning starting and general land uses for the site. That began with the park board and the city working together once the barge terminal had closed. Then we transitioned into land uses and concept plan once there was a master developer selected, and there was a number of engagement events, different types of outreach and engagement. Again, from 2015 to 2019. I think, you know, I would like to refer people to the project website for more history and more information about community engagement to date. Once the concept plan, draft concept plan was out for community engagement in 2018, community input and input from the City Council refined and revised that concept plan, and then City Council ultimately adopted the concept plan for Upper Harbor Terminal in March of 2019. At that time, as part of the City Council approval of the plan or actions related to the approval, they formed the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee, or established the committee. The committee began meeting in the summer of 2019, and that brings us to the current phase of community engagement, which is really bolstered by the UHT CPC, as we call the Collaborative Planning Committee, the Park Board's Community Advisory Committee, as well as community engagement events called the Learning Tables, which are convened by the Public Policy Project, the Environmental Justice Coordinating Council, and with support from Pillsbury United Communities. Those Learning Table events have been running concurrent with the UHT CPC meetings and the MPRB CAC meetings. They have all been meeting since summer of 2019, have dedicated a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of expertise to the process. And as we transition now out of this phase of deeper engagement through committee work and learning tables, we are out sharing the draft coordinated plan. Next slide, please. This gives you some sense, hopefully, of the different phases and a different kind of visualization. This is really just from 2017 to 2020. It doesn't capture everything, but I think, again, if you think about current phases and different places that we've been, different people that have been involved in the project, either from the city staff side of things, from community partners and engagement side of things, this does hopefully give you a better sense of activity. We do, you know, recognize and welcome that people are finding out more about the project all the time, maybe even introduced to the project these days for the first time. So, you know, we continue to get the word out and make sure people are aware of the redevelopment project and the opportunity that's on this site. Next slide, please. I would like to turn it over at this time to Brandon Champeau to talk through some of the changes from the concept plan to the coordinated plan and more about the coordinated plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Okay, so appreciate the time here, everyone. And again, Brandon Champeau, Senior Vice President with United Properties. As I mentioned, have been on this project since we submitted our RFQ to the city back in 2016 and were selected as a part of a development team with First Avenue, and at that time Thor companies that which I'll talk about the project team here in a little bit. But before I jump into the changes here, I just wanted to just give a couple of comments, more personal comments about this process. You know, as Hilary just mentioned, we're into our 4th year of community engagement here. I've attended personally over 130 community meetings on this project so far, and you know, it certainly has been a challenging process at times, a learning process for me at times, but I'm very proud of the work that we've been doing here, and especially the work that we've done with the CPC and the learning table teams over the last 18 months in you know, difficult times, obviously for many people, and but we're getting there, and we're excited about about what the outcome of this work is. And so I'm going to talk here about some of the changes from the concept plan to the coordinated plan, and then get into some specifics on the coordinated plan here over the next few slides. So first off, when we got a concept plan approved back in March of 2019, really what that concept plan did was just kind of provide a framework for future planning. At the time, we had done 2 years of community engagement to get to that point, and there were a lot of spirited discussions over that time. What was challenging was trying to create a kind of balanced plan that satisfied a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives. And some of the comments that we heard back then were from people, some people would say it needs to all be a park. Some people said it needs to all be housing. Some people said it needs to all be job creation space. And so what the concept plan did was just gave us a framework to try to advance some of those discussions into more detail, because it was quite frankly at the time kind of difficult to get people to galvanize around one idea. And so when the concept plan was approved, it included a lot of what I would say more of like ranges, like you can see from this from the chart that we have up here. When we were talking about housing, it was a wide range, 250 to 500 units. A community hub that was, just very preliminary in what we were thinking. Commercial space that was to be determined, and talking about it in a future phase. And what we've done now with the coordinated plan is brought a lot more detail to some of these specific items. A couple of key things that really have changed. If you can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to point them out here. The first being I'll start with A, the Community Performing Arts Center. This is some people refer to it as the amphitheater, the music venue, performing arts center. This is the piece that First Avenue has been really leading as part of our team. And when the concept plan was approved, the CPAC, the Performing Arts Center, was really kind of embedded into the park, and that concerned a lot of people. And there were a lot of people that didn't like the music venue being right on the riverfront. And so one of the big changes that you'll see from concept plan to coordinated plan is taking the CPAC out of the park and really giving it its own parcel on the other side of the future River Road. And so that separates it, it still gives it a prominent location, obviously, next to the park, but it separates it from the public park and from the waterfront, and is more in line with how development has been done up and down the river. Another big change, there was a lot of spirited discussions about a hotel. We were at the time in 2017 and 18 thought that a riverfront hotel here would be appealing, and there were some people that agree with that, many people that didn't agree with that, particularly having the hotel in a prominent location where it was in the concept plan, which is shown as where we have the letter B right on the park. A lot of people didn't like that. The hotel has been removed. It's been replaced with mixed income affordable housing that'll be targeted for families. And we'll get into some specifics on the housing strategy here in a second. And then the other kind of big change is really, at the time, we weren't focused too much on what the commercial space here should be, the heavy job production space. That was really thought of as a future phase. And through our work with the CPC, have now moved the commercial space, the job production space, up into really phase one with a goal of providing living wage attainable jobs here. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a second. And then the other two quick things here, the community hub. So back at the concept plan stage, there was a community hub shown on Parcel D, and again, it was just it was really just a word, a community hub. Nobody really knew what it was. There were people that said there needs to be a very focused space for community here, and so we said, okay, we'll keep a parcel set aside for that, and we'll figure out what that should be. Well, we've with the work of the CPC have at least advanced to a theme that people are starting to galvanize around, and that's around health and wellness. And so we've now designated a parcel for a future health and wellness center as part of this project, and that's shown on D on the coordinated plan. And then the last thing here, when the concept plan was approved, it contemplated the city selling this land to us or to the future developers to be developed, and that that was met with a lot of resistance from people in the community. They didn't like the idea of the riverfront being sold to private developers, and so that has now been changed, and the city in this plan will retain ownership of the land and will be conveying development rights through a ground lease structure. So, but the land will stay owned publicly here for the foreseeable future or forever. Next slide, please. Another big change back in 2019, right when our concept plan got approved, it was a tough time for not only our development team, but also for North Minneapolis, in that right at the end of 2018, Thor Companies, who was one of our partners at the time, was going through some financial troubles and ended up closing up their business. So it left a significant hole, I would say, in our development team, and it's taken us some time to fill that. But what we have in early 2020 were auxtroduced through a number of community members to Devin George, who is a Northsider and Augsburg basketball star, an NBA champion with the Lakers, and now is a successful and really inspiring affordable housing developer. And we were introduced to Devin early last year and started discussing some possible ways of working together, and those discussions have really evolved into formal partnership negotiations and plans now, particularly around the affordable housing that we're proposing, as well as of some vision and ideas that Devin has for the health and wellness hub. Next slide. So before we get into the plan, another thing that we really needed to work with the CPC on early was really defining who is community. And this also was a very debated topic in the first 2 years of community engagement here. There were many people who thought that community was the entire state or anybody who could access the river. There were some people who thought community is the city and, the city of Minneapolis or the region. Other people who said that community is people that live or work nearby, people with certain zip codes. So we really needed to kind of bring some closure to that and bring some framework around who community is, so that we could really, as we start to talk about who's going to benefit, we have a definition of community. And so that's what, credit to the CPC on this, that have proposed a definition of community here, which I'm not going to repeat. Everybody can read it, but there's some very I think telling words and comment or definitions here about this is about benefiting people on the north side, particularly African descendants of slaves, Black and Indigenous people of color, and then those that are living nearest or most affected by what the outcome of this project can be, and especially people that have been marginalized, not just historically, but currently, and really keeping those people in mind in everything that we do here. Next slide, please. And the next step, really, after defining community, was really determining what are the community's kind of objectives and priorities around the project, and really rallying around a set of values, which we have come up with 6 values here, particularly around economic inclusion, community ownership, disrupting gentrification and displacement, providing affordable housing, dealing with environmental justice issues, and creating a sustainable and resilient project, and then creating a place that really is North and feels North and has ownership by North around the design and the programming and really what that public space feels like. And so those are the 6 values that were created, and I'll get into some of these objectives in a little bit. Next slide. I'm not going to read this because it's a lot of detail, but I would encourage everybody to go to the equitable and resilient inclusive development decision matrix that was created out of this process with the CPC and the learning tables, And this is really where there's a, as some people in the CPC have characterized this as the report card for the project. These are the values, these are the priorities, the objectives. You know, there's success metrics here, and really this is what we have been trying to filter all of our decisions through, is how we're impacting these various objectives. And so a lot of detail here, but I would encourage everybody to really dig into this and read it, because a lot of work went into it. Next slide. So really, once we were able to define community and create the values and kind of pair that up with a real estate plan, you know, really that's what starts to create the vision of what this place can be. And I'm not going to repeat all of this here, but if we could actually just go to the next slide. You know, having a definition of who should benefit, having the values that community has, and then having a place to actually create, you know, tangible assets that can then respond to those values and respond to that community, is really how we get to this vision statement here. And you know, it's not been lost on anybody through this process. This is an incredibly large site. It's a once a generation opportunity to really, you know, remake almost a mile of riverfront here. And so what the outcome of this project needs to be is this community asset for North Minneapolis, and it needs to address as much as possible the injustices that have been done to the people near this site, or who live there currently, or lived there in the past, or near the past. And that's what we are doing our best to try to do here. Next slide, please. So an overview of the real estate plan, and really this is just to kind of get into land use and program here. But the plan is a mix of three kind of primary uses: places to live, places for a community and for interaction, and then places for jobs. Excuse me. And what we've done here in if we could go to, well, actually keep on the slide for a second, how these uses have laid out. You can see the yellow, which it shows the housing space, is focused primarily on the north side of the site. I know it's not exactly telling here on this where north is, but the north side of the site is where we focus all the housing. That keeps us the furthest away from some of the heavy industry, particularly the GAF plant and other sites just south of Lowry that, you know, quite frankly, aren't probably great places to live next to. And so we've tried to keep all the housing as focused as far to the north as possible. The new park that will be put in here, the 19.5 acre park, you know, really sets the stage then for what can happen around it. And so we've tried to, on the ground levels of these buildings, provide commercial spaces that will be programmed for, you know, community tenants, community needs. But, you know, really it's that ground level, and then the places that you see in pink that are, you know, focused on this community interaction. And really we wanted to center that around the park, since that's where, you know, kind of the center of gravity for the site. And then the job creation spaces, the job spaces, focus spaces, particularly in creating attainable living wage jobs. We have shown that on the south end of the site, and we are labeling these buildings as manufacturing, production, processing, or urban food production or processing. You know, we're still bringing some detail to who those groups could be, and are talking with a lot of different groups that have interest in those spaces, particularly around food production, which we're really excited about. So, but the goal of the south end of that site is to really create those livable, attainable jobs. Next slide, please. So just to dive a little bit deeper into each of these uses. So the housing on the north end of the site, it's broken up into 4 different buildings, and phase 1 is really the 2 sites that are centered or that are directly adjacent to the park. And they're not labeled there, but the phase 1 project, or the total housing, I'm sorry, in this that's proposed here is about 520 units. Phase 1 will deliver about 270 of those units, 275 approximately. Sorry, can't remember off the top of my head. And both of the phase 1 projects are right now proposed as mixed income affordable. The project directly on the river and adjacent to the park would be focused on families, larger units that would be accommodating to families. And then the project that's along Dowling but facing the park would be focused on workforce housing. And another key element here is of the total amount of units, 66% of the units that are proposed in phase 1 are being proposed at income levels attainable to people earning 30 to 50% of AMI, which is really the level of affordability that's needed to be attainable housing for the north side. Depending on the source, the area median income for the entire region is just over $100,000 per year. The area median income in many of the neighborhoods or zip codes within North is about 40% of that. And so it was a big request to create housing here that is attainable to Northsiders, and that's what we've tried to do, especially in phase 1 with 2 affordable projects, mixed income projects with a heavy focus on it being attainable. And then the future phase housing along the river and along Dowling in 94, there's been requests by the CPC to introduce potentially a senior project here. We are still debating or talking through whether there should be market rate or how much market rate. And so there are future phase projects planned and could include senior and some unrestricted housing. But part of the reason why we're also proposing them as future phase is because once phase 1 is done, we can kind of come back and determine what's the right use to bring next. One more other quick thing here. On the ground level of these buildings, there are townhomes effectively that are being proposed. And rather than proposing an entirely rental project here, we are proposing a mix of affordable rentals, but also units that can be for sale or owned. And we are still working through what the affordability strategy for that would be. But the goal is to have those townhomes also be proposed in a mixed income, affordable kind of format that would be attainable for Northside residents to not only be able to rent a place at at Upper Harbor, but also to be able to buy a home in the future as well. Next slide. And this is a graphic depiction of the phase 1 housing building that would be dedicated or would be targeted toward families. And again, not a lot of detail on the design yet. This is really just to kind of show the massing of the project, and if the project is approved, we'll have to go to the next level on design here, but it gives you a sense for what that housing would look like from the river. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about the jobs next, and again, there's multiple layers of jobs that will be created with this project. There's the future jobs that will be generated by the businesses that are operating here. There's jobs that will be created through the construction process, jobs that are created as just part of the development process, and the vendors that we're looking to hire, and the designers, the engineers, the contractors. But right now we're going to talk here about the future businesses on site. And so again, a focus on providing space that would be attractive for tenants that are in manufacturing or food production is what we're proposing here. Some people have referred to it as business park space, but these, the goal here is to work or to find companies that will place a heavy emphasis on hiring people from North, creating job opportunities for people from North, partnering with workforce development organizations, and really about creating career pathways, not just about creating jobs that are that don't offer any upside, but about how to provide an entry level or attainable job, but that also can lead to a career. And so we'll be selective in the businesses that we work with, and we're going to be upfront with businesses about what those expectations of them are. And we're already starting to have discussions with groups that have expressed some interest. And then what these job production spaces also provide an opportunity for as well is ways for us to start to incorporate some of the sustainability elements. when you have production facilities or manufacturing facilities, there can be a lot of rooftop space. And so we've proposed that as potentially spaces for urban agriculture. It could be a rooftop greenhouse or aero or hydroponics, or it could be space that's dedicated for solar installation. It could be both. So we're working through that right now, but we think that the rooftops of these buildings could, not just be rooftops, but could really be benefits back to the community, either through sustainability, energy production, or food production. Next slide, please. This just gives a depiction of the site from the south end of the site, those buildings that I was just talking about here. So the community focused spaces, again, this is really where the public interaction will be, the ground level experience of the buildings, the sidewalk experience, and then the places like the community hub, like the retail space and commercial space, and then the community performing arts center. And I'm just going to touch on each of these here. Starting with the community performing arts center, what you see there is not a design of this place. It's just a placeholder to show what kind of a typical amphitheater, I guess, would look like. But the design process for this is just getting started in First Avenue. Now that the bond money has been awarded, we'll be leading that design process, and that will be gearing up here in Q1 and Q2, assuming the project the coordinated plan is approved. The community performing arts center right now is contemplated to have up to 10,000 seats, which would allow it to I think be kind of medium-sized events, I guess, in the music world. But it will also, as a stipulation in the bonding package, it requires that it be a 4-season facility. So it may not accommodate 10,000 seats in the middle of winter, but the structure itself will be designed to be open and operating throughout the year, and so could provide great community event spaces. There could be church services here. There could be open mic nights, and those could go on even when it's snowing and cold outside. And so it will be a 4-season facility. The community, the health and wellness hub, again, there's not a ton of detail here other than just a vision for a health and wellness center, and some of the concepts that have been thrown at us from community members or companies with interest, particularly around providing places for youth recreation, for preventative health services, after school programming. There could be events or sporting events or tournaments, but really this being a place that focuses on providing health and wellness services to the north side. And we're really excited about what this could be. We've studied a lot of similar concepts around the country, and really we even have some of our locally based companies here have been sponsors of these types of facilities in other parts of the countries, and so we're excited to start talking to them about what's possible here as well. And then the ground floor commercial spaces, which will be again focused on more of retail or restaurant space, but these are really where, again, that sidewalk experience is kind of where you'll get the feel for what Upper Harbor will be. And so we're excited to take that to the next level of planning. Next slide. And here again, just provides a depiction of the Parcel 6A, so the project that's right along Dowling. This is looking down Dowling towards the river, and gives kind of a sense for what a street scene here could feel like. Again, there's not detail to the design of these buildings yet, but it gives you a sense for the massing and kind of, again, that sort of street experience. Next slide. I'm just going to switch the focus here now to a couple of the community benefits. So starting with, as I mentioned earlier, the public ownership of the land. The city is what we are proposing here, and really, owe the broad community for this, as well as the CPC, to really bring some detail into this. But the city would retain ownership of this land, would convey development rights through a ground lease structure, and The only kind of difference here, you see one parcel shown in purple, that's the community performing arts parcel, and because of the bond requirements, that land cannot be owned by the city. So what we are proposing is that that land be owned by First Avenue and a community entity partner, which we are working on creating an RFQ right now that would go public to find that partner. But really bringing an organization in that would partner with First Avenue, be a landowner with them, and then would ensure that that land over time could either be, could ownership could be retained back to the community, or could go to the city whenever the bonding stipulations are done. Next slide, please. The other thing then that this public ownership of land really, and then the Community Performing Arts Center creates two really significant revenue opportunities. And normally when the city or any landowner is conveying development rights through a ground lease, the developers are paying to basically own their buildings on that land. They're paying that landowner every year for that right, to continue that right. Normally, when the city does that, those funds would go into their general fund or somewhere. But what the CPC is recommending, and what we're supporting that recommendation here, is that those funds that would be paid annually, rather than going back to the city, or they would go to the city, but that would be redirected back to community-focused initiatives, particularly around gentrification and displacement. And so if the council approves this, that could create a revenue stream. The ground lease payments alone create a revenue stream anywhere between $250,000 and maybe $400,000 per year for really the next 99 years, and could be longer than that if the ground leases are extended, but would generate a significant amount of revenue back to the community. And then in addition to that, the First Avenue has proposed to add a $3 ticket fee to all of their events, and that $3 ticket fee could generate as much as $500 to $750, or if they had a lot of events one year, maybe up to $1 million, again, of annual revenue that would be directed back to a community or to community-focused fund. And so those two revenue sources really provide a stream of money back to the north side that would be completely controlled by a north side organization. And some ideas that have been thrown out about what those funds could do. They could be used for property tax relief or foreclosure prevention. They could be used to subsidize spaces for north side entrepreneurs. They could be used to provide free or subsidized programming in the community health and wellness hub. Free programming in the Community Performing Arts Center. So whatever would this group would, or community organization would decide, it would be up to them to decide what to do with those funds. But again, an annual revenue stream, reoccurring revenue stream that can continually be invested back to the community, we think is a really big win. Next slide, please. And then the other thing that we're really working hard now on is, as I mentioned a couple of times, a community entity that would control or would have control over these funds. But also, we are interested in finding a community partner or community entity that could partner with us to take ownership in these community-focused spaces. I've already talked about an organization that could own the land with First Avenue. First Avenue is also interested in an organization that could co-manage this facility with them, and really manage those community-focused events. We're interested in community partners to either, if one organization was out there and could do it, to come in and take control and ownership of all of the community-focused spaces. If an organization doesn't have the resources to do that, we're interested in partnering with them, with an organization on that, and at the very least, working with an organization as an advisor to really make sure that these spaces are focused and programmed around community needs, priorities, aspirations, not just on day one of the project, but on in year 10 and beyond as the project builds out and is fully operating. And so we're excited about this. There's some models around the country of ways that we can pull this together, and different ways that community organizations have come together to do something like this. And so we're hopeful that this will work out and we'll find a group that can, or multiple groups that can help us here. Next slide. I'm not going to, this is getting into the detail how we intend to select this group, but right now, just to summarize here, we're working on an RFQ document that would go public as soon as the council approves the plan. And, you know, again, the goal here to try to find a partner or a coalition of partners at the, you know, really in June or July of this year, so that as we start to dive into the details of the planning of phase one and everything, that partner is at the table with us and helping make those decisions. And again, I've pointed out some precedent models here that we've been focused on. I've talked with a lot of these organizations about how they've pulled it off. Next slide, please. This again just provides kind of a little more detail of how we intend to go about selecting that group. I just described it at a high level, but we have this RFQ document. We're working with McKinley neighborhood right now. And again, that if the concept plan is approved in late February, this RFQ would go public. We'd have the next 2 to 3 months to work to try to find that organization, and then would hopefully select them at the beginning of summer. Next slide. This just tries to summarize or a significant amount of the community benefits that I just described here, particularly around ownership of the land, ownership of the various spaces, and then where the funds and kind of control in these spaces are being retained. And so there's a lot on this slide, I know, but if I would encourage everybody to go to the plan, page 37, and just kind of study it, and really it provides a good overview of everything that we're proposing here. Next slide. And here as well, I think I only have 2 more slides left. So as we get into the community entity selection process and really the community benefits agreements and things that will come with each of these plans, we've tried to map out here how each of the real estate projects and the legal contracts and the community values will intersect. And so, the goal here is not just to tell you things that we're going to do. The goal is to tell you what we're going to do, put it into a contract, and then make sure that there's mechanisms in place that enforce the things that need to get done, so that Upper Harbor stays focused on benefiting the community and really delivering projects that do that. And so again, a lot of detail here, but it provides a guide to all the different agreements and where things will be contained. Next slide. So I think this is my last slide here. This is showing really a 5 or I guess 6 year kind of timeline. And when we got started on this project in 2016, we thought back then it would be about a decade to get done. I will fully admit I didn't think that it would be 4 years of engagement. I thought it would be maybe half of that, and then we'd be in construction. But we are still in this engagement process. If the plan gets approved, we've got a significant amount of planning yet to do around just phase one. Really, the next 18 months would be focused on getting the phase one planning done, with a goal of getting city infrastructure work started, getting phase one development started at the end of 2022, and would put us on path to start delivering actual projects and being able to stand out there and seeing new things really in the beginning of 2024. And then hopefully phase two is really following that as close as possible, so that we can deliver all of this, and really create this new community at once. Next slide. And this is just my last slide there. So I'm going to turn it back to, or turn it over to Nathan and to talk about public realm.
Brandon, for the next part.
Oh, Alexander, sorry.
It's all good. Let's see. So hi everyone, my name is Alexander Cato. I'm with Minneapolis Public Works in the Transportation Planning Division and leading the engagement for the public realm and infrastructure. Next slide, please. So Brandon did a great job, and did Hilary, of kind of providing a high-level overview of the Upper Harbor. There's so many pieces. We could spend, hours on each slide, in my opinion, just because there's so much. So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of infrastructure, and also queue it up, and then I'll transition to my colleague Alyssa, who's going to highlight some of the engagement work that will be going on that is public realm and infrastructure specific. Since a lot of the content that Hilary and Brandon covered is focused on the coordinated plan, which is also going through an engagement process, hence the meeting we're having tonight. So for infrastructure, you can see on this map here, the content highlighted in blue, starting at Dowling and Lindale and continuing east into the Upper Harbor site, including Parkway Phase 1 and then 33rd Avenue North. That accounts for about a mile of infrastructure, so quite a massive amount. 1 mile doesn't think like a lot, but I don't know, how long do you think it would take you to walk that 1 mile infrastructure? It's a pretty massive amount. That also includes utilities as well. Some of the critical pieces that we're focusing on with this infrastructure is providing a connected system. So that way, whether you're biking, walking, taking public transit, or driving, that you're able to get to the site, travel through the Upper Harbor area, and then also to leave to go back to wherever you need to be. We want that to be done with safety, especially for our most vulnerable users, which are typically our pedestrians and cyclists. So we want to have really safe transportation options for them. And we want to provide a transportation system and utilities that really provides a really rich riverfront experience. It's a place where, maybe you're coming for an hour and you end up staying for 4 hours because you're just having such a nice time there. And we want to make sure that the infrastructure to get you there and through there is the best it can be. Next slide, please. So for the first part is Upper Dowling. We call it Upper Dowling just because if you're in the Upper Harbor and you look to Dowling, it goes up a hill, so it's kind of up in the view. So we consider that Upper Dowling, and that's from Lindale to the bridge. And this will be a full reconstruction. This was not originally in the scope for the Upper Harbor project, but we recognized how critical this piece was, and we did some internal work to scope this in and to scope it in with the reconstruction. If you've been on Dowling, the pavement condition, the roadway is definitely in need of some improvements. There is existing bike lanes on the road, but it's also a high volume street. When I say high volume, I mean there's a lot of vehicle traffic, upwards of 10,000 vehicles a day. And with our city policies now, when we have volumes that high, we try to separate cyclists from vehicles. And so with this proposed concept, and this is just a proposed concept, it's a sketch, you can see there's a shared use path. We call it a multi-use trail on the south side of the street. So that'd be shared amongst cyclists and pedestrians. This is a very constrained right-of-way, so we are in this situation providing that treatment option or recommending that treatment option. And then on the north side of the street, you would just have a sidewalk as well as a planted boulevard. And this design treatment would start at Lindale and travel east to the Dowling Bridge. Next slide, please. And I'm going to actually just transition into the next slide, actually, please. So the city is working with MnDOT to pursue opportunities to improve the safety and comfort for folks traveling across the bridge and into the site. Absent major investments from MnDOT, the city has worked to identify immediate solutions to address safety and access. This is a treatment that exists on 26th Avenue North. It's about 1.25 miles south of the Dalian Avenue North Bridge, and would be a potential treatment option until a full reconstruction or redecking of the bridge would occur, and that has not been outlined in the short term. And when I say in the short term, within the time of this project. This diagram shows the treatment on the north side. Our proposal is on the south side so that you'd have that continuous shared use kind of bike treatment on the south. And this would travel across the bridge. Can we go to the next slide, please? And then here we have Lower Dowling. Brandon has highlighted this image in a few of his slides as well, but I'm just revisiting it since it really does highlight a potential infrastructure treatment. So you have a two-way roadway, You have a two-way separated bike path, once again continuing that bicycle separated treatment that starts at Lyndale. You also have a sidewalk here, and then adjacent to that you have some land use activity. This is a conceptual sketch, but is a pretty accurate representation of what this area could look like after it's developed. You see a lot of folks out there enjoying the space. You see, folks moving to and from the site on bike and car and walking. And this is a pretty a fun illustration of what Lower Dowling could be. And then this road, it's a little difficult to see, but as you travel east, it would enter a railroad crossing. So we have a railroad crossing treatment, and then you would actually enter in the UHT area and into the park. Can we go to the next slide, please? Here we have the parkway. Once again, Brandon shared this in his previous slides. This is an illustrative concept, but it is what the parkway could look like, or is proposed to look like. We have the typical red granite chip surface seal. It'd be a two-way roadway. Then we have a nice green boulevard buffer, and then we have another two-way bicycle facility for those folks that are biking, scootering, rollerblading, etc., skateboarding too, or any other type of wheel device for that matter. And then another separate walkway for pedestrians. And you can see these facilities, as I highlighted in my previous slides, are really focused on providing a rich riverfront experience, providing safe and comfortable options for those cycling and walking across the UHT site. And this is also just a really critical piece because it connects a lot of the land uses within the Upper Harbor Terminal. Next slide, please. And our final piece of infrastructure is 33rd Avenue. Right now, if you've been to 33rd Avenue, the roadway condition is in need of improvement. There are no sidewalks, there's no bike facilities. So this is slated to be our secondary access point. So we wanted to provide those multimodal facilities. We also have a few rail crossings at 33rd that will have some type of rail crossing treatment to ensure safe movements. And this is also a really critical piece for serving those southern land uses that Brandon talked about will be a lot of the light industrial use. And this is also slated to be included within the infrastructure for phase one. Next slide, please. So the final pieces of infrastructure are the utilities, the things that you don't really think about, but they're very important. Your running water, making sure your sewer lines and toilets are working. The things that are under the ground that you don't see, but when they're not working, can cause a lot of problems. So this infrastructure project also will upgrade and expand existing utility services for the land uses proposed for the park, etc. And a critical component to these is also the stormwater piece. So we, as in the city, are working with Mississippi Watershed Management Organization to explore the development of at a minimum a district system and potentially a regional system to capture, treat, and convey stormwater runoff. So when there's a storm, when there's rain, when the snow melts, that water is treated before it is discharged into the Mississippi River. I think we all agree that it's really exciting that this part of North Minneapolis is going to have some investments and really kind of reimagine that public space and really re-enjoy the river in this part of the city. And we want to make sure that we're providing some of the best green infrastructure treatments that we can offer in order to really maximize that utility. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to transition it to my colleague Lissa. She's going to talk about a lot of the engagement activities. As I said, this engagement is going to be very public realm and infrastructure focused, and is going to continue off of the great work that's been done by the coordinated plan, as most of my colleagues have talked about. So now I'm going to transition to Alyssa to chat more about engagement.
Hello again, everybody. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, not to take too much time, what we've heard is that we want to design, build, and support public spaces that prioritize inclusivity and community ownership for Northside residents. So we want to make sure that the infrastructure and the roads and the paths and the trails can support that. We want to connect to the greater community and overcome I-94, the barrier that it creates, and provide, and create comfortable and safe transportation options for that. And of course, as we've all been talking about, is a riverfront experience that we all deserve. And then, of course, supporting the existing and future transit service. There's been lots of talks about that. So our intent and our goals for public realm engagement is to ensure that the project information is readily available. We want to hear and honor all aspects of this project. We are going to continue to steer back towards the public realm portions. We want to strengthen the relationship between all of North Minneapolis, this project team who's done a lot of work, and all the stakeholders involved, and create desirable infrastructure and public realm elements that reflect the community needs. So we want to create excitement and create a sense of ownership, and hope that the community really feels that this is a knitting and a stitching back together of something that was was torn apart a long time ago. And we do want to hear everything. We want to hear concerns, and like I said, again, we're going to steer back towards the public realm and infrastructure in all of our engagement. Next slide, please. So we have a very short timeline in our particular portion. There's been a lot of engagement that's been happening. We have been working on designing of these spaces along the roads since July of 2020, and we're going to go through to the about a year, so out to August of this year. We are doing a couple of engagements, so we have multiple streams in which
Lisa, we're
going to come back and do a. You're losing me?
Yeah.
Can you
Why
hear
don't
me
you
okay?
shut your
Camera off?
shut your camera off and just
Okay.
talk over the image here.
Okay, great. Is that better?
So far, so good.
All right, great. Nothing like having to change and adapt and adjust. So we are doing a couple of virtual community open houses. Of course, we would rather engage with people in public and in person, but as these times have called, this is the best way in which we can reach out. And then within that, there's also an integrated public art piece, and that is going to stretch kind of through our process and into later, just a little bit beyond our project. And the stormwater work is ongoing to get us to a layout and 30% plan development at the end of August. So we have a quite short timeline for this piece of the project, but we're excited and ready to go. Next slide, please. So I was talking about multiple strategies for community engagement, and these are our approaches. So we are available on the project website, and we'll provide information, our timeline, and how to connect. It is on the Upper Harbor website now. We will be launching an interactive online survey, and we'll update that as we go along with some visual preferences to understand art in the public realm and things like that, and routing your map on how you would possibly get to and through the Upper Harbor site. Again, I talked about focus group meetings. We're starting them this week. We have 5 of them, and we are actually also doing a set of office hours that are going to happen 3 different time periods over the course of 2 days early next week. And then we're also, again, like I said, a virtual open house in January here at the end of the month, and then another one in March. And we're hoping for lots of participation and appreciate your time. Next slide.
All right, oh, now we go to Joanna. Joanna? Hold on, we're having some technical difficulties. Just hold on with us for a moment. Well, while we're waiting for Joanna to jump back in, I think we lost a few people as we were wont to do on these. Always an adventure in technology. I'll just pick up the pieces here, or pick up the presentation and talk about the implementation, the next step. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we're part of a process, as Brandon has said, and Hilary has said earlier in this presentation. This has been a long process to get to this point, and it's just the next the milestone. We're in the public comment period for this draft coordinated plan, which will go through the end of the month. Another 10 days from now, we take that feedback again online. And then as we are doing our outreach engagement right now, we'll have some more events that we talked about, but they're all listed on our Upper Harbor, Minneapolis, including one this weekend with the University of Minnesota at URock. So after we collect this public comment, we will draft the final plan and work with the CPC to review that plan, and then that plan would go to the City Council for approval in February. And then that's just the next step. So if you could go to the next slide, please. You'll see after that, we have still a number of months to do environmental reviews, the engagement that Alexander and Lissa talked about around the public realm, and then we'll get into some official documents that will be approved by the City Council later in the year. And those will be term sheets, and those term sheets will be the basis under which we would be conveying land through those ground leases for development, and it'll identify the benefits and the kind of the deal points that need to be met in order for us to convey the land. And then we will, at that point in time, we'll also get through the environmental review process, and then the design, land use approvals, the city planning commission, and that sort of thing would occur through the next year and a half. And then we should see construction starting on the infrastructure and the first phases of the park the fall of next year. So we're still about 2 years away from kind of the earth being moved. So that's kind of an overview of the next step. So this is yet another step in the long process of connecting the river to the greater McKinley and Northside community. So if we can go to the next slide, we're at the question and answer portion of tonight's event, and you've been putting questions in the chat, and the staff has been the technical staff has been putting those and publishing most of those questions, and I'm going to start with some questions, and I'm going to be answering some of them and then sending some to some of the project team. And the first question that I'm going to start off with is around why did we select the development team early? The city has a redevelopment authority. We own this property. We used it as a facility, kind of like a fire station. We use it as a barging terminal, help with commerce in the region, and we've been operating it for a number of decades. And when it no longer had a use as a barging terminal, it became a development opportunity. And the city will convey properties typically through its development authority in two ways, either through a request for proposal or a request for qualifications. In this, the difference is bringing a partner in early, or bringing a partner in, or bringing in a concept in later in the process. Okay. Sorry, as much as we script this, we still have life around us, so I apologize for that. I had to answer a question from my son. Back to the request for qualifications versus request for proposals. So the city chose the request for qualifications approach, and in that we went out to the development community and asked for a partner. And the reason we did this is because this is such a complicated site, requiring the city and the park board to work together. We also needed some expertise and additional capacity around the development of the property. Not only are we looking at redevelopment of the site, we're also having to do all the infrastructure at the site, and that was something that was just a little bit too far for the city to be able to handle. The pre-development work that has been going on for the last, now 4 years, going into its 4th year, is expensive, and we wanted to help defray some of those costs with a partnership with the developer. And so that's how United Properties was chosen, and they had a development team, as Brandon said, with Thor and First Avenue. We also have an agreement, kind of a trilateral agreement between the city, the park board, and the United Properties. So that's the reason why we selected them. And then they've been working with us and the community and the park board through the concept plan and now the coordinated plan. And during the coordinated plan is when we added the collaborative planning committee, and really the collaborative planning committee has been working directly with the development team. The staff at the city is basically kind of keeping the boundaries set of where we can and can't go as far as a city, but most of those details are being ironed out and negotiated between the CPC and the development team. Okay, the next question I've got I'm going to throw this over to Nathan. We've got some questions about the environmental reviews, mainly around some of the studies that occur with those environmental reviews around noise. So first question is around noise restrictions of the music venue, but maybe you could just kind of go over the AUAR and what studies are coming out of that.
Thanks, Eric. I could talk more specifically to the traffic study that we're leading at Public Works with the AUAR, and as a part of this is traditionally looking at the traffic generated from the site. So we've been working closely with CPED and the development team. As you've seen with Brandon's presentation, that's highlighted a number of the uses. So this work has been looking at the traditional traffic that's been expected to be generated with this development, as well as what the maximum build out would be under 2040. So we should have those results ready to share on the project website, I believe within the week, so people are able to see that. So that will also come with expected mitigation measures that help to encourage and prioritize both safe and comfortable traffic, or safe and comfortable mobility options for all modes. So that's expected to be covered. In relation to the noise study, I would have to defer to someone else on the CPED team to handle that question.
Okay, we're going to see if we can get Joanna Hicks on the call. She's had some technical difficulties. If not, I'm going to look to Hilary. Maybe she can answer that question for us.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I will do my best to do so. So as far as questions about noise restrictions around the music venue, the venue would need to comply with the city's noise ordinance, and had wanted to note that a noise study that is underway has shown no adverse effects on the nearby Heron Rookery or surrounding neighborhoods, and wanted to underscore that new buildings that are constructed on the site will be implementing any noise mitigation strategies through either building materials or other techniques, and also that acoustic consultants and theater planners will be advising the design team on optimal audio setup to reduce the noise off the property and also improve the concert going experience for customers. There are a number of ways that this can be accomplished through acoustic treatments, and that the acoustic design work would be commencing after the schematic design for the CPAC, the Community Performing Arts Center, is formalized.
All right, thank you, Hilary, for jumping in. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties with some of the project team, so we will probably have to go through a few people to answer some of these questions. I'm going to go back to Nathan for a question around how are people getting here and there. You talked a little bit about the transportation. I'm sorry, I had a little bit off with the question order here, but can you talk about you know, parking, transportation hub, traffic pattern, and really, I think what this is also leading to is how are people coming to these big events when we're able to have big events again in America?
Great question. So I'll also highlight that as a part of the traffic study, one of the things that we did look at was traffic patterns, both in the immediate neighborhood under existing conditions, how they're accessing the freeway, coming from the neighborhood, from downtown, commuting. So we tried our best to capture that in existing conditions, but also project that out. So we do have that included in the traffic analysis as well as any mitigation. You heard that in Hilary's answer, she talked about mitigation. That's one of the key factors that will be included in the AWR is how we're mitigating some of this. And then as far as like the event traffic management plan, so that isn't included in the traditional initial traffic study. That's a specific plan that will be developed in concert with the Community Performing Arts Center. And that's because we traditionally don't have the events happening during our traditional peak commuting periods. So the city will be working very closely with the development team to identify a whole suite of strategies to accommodate events, and that will include shuttling services and providing traffic control agents, looking at access for people with mobility needs. The city has a lot of experience doing this, as you'd imagine, with a number of the large sporting venues that we have throughout the city, US Bank, Target Field, Target Center, as well as hosting major events like the Super Bowl. I would like to say that we have some of the better experienced staff to put together some of these event management plans. And that's something that will be in the works as this works its way through the land use approvals.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm going to ask some questions to Alexander next, based on your presentation about the new connection from Dowling. And there's a few questions that you might want to ask, and I think we've got a big transition for all of us who've been up that hill on Dowling. It's pretty treacherous, even if you're driving in a car, it's pretty treacherous to get up that hill. But can you talk about, like, the specific question is why are there so many bike lanes? But maybe can you talk about how are we going to make it more comfortable to come from the top of the hill down to the bottom of the hill and back up again? And then as we are thinking about this, is the city planning on acquiring any additional property to widen the road?
Yeah, no, great questions, Eric. Why are there so many bike lanes is a great question. I think some folks would say there's too many. Some folks say there's not enough. And it really ties back to city policy, specifically the Complete Streets policy, and a lot of the guidance in our Transportation Action Plan on reducing single occupancy vehicle trips. And because of that, we are, to the best of our ability, trying to provide multimodal facilities. So not only are we providing roadways, we're providing sidewalks, bike paths, and capacity for public transit as well. So it's really providing a comprehensive road, and some folks may use some elements of that roadway more than others, but we still, to the best of our ability, try to provide a really balanced network. And also not just on Dowling, and I didn't talk about this as much in my presentation, but we are looking at providing connectivity on Washington Avenue North. We've been working a lot with Hennepin County. There's a few projects to the north, such as the Weber-Camden 44 bikeway network that we're trying to connect into, and to the south on Washington Avenue to connect to Lowry Avenue and that bridge. So we are really trying to provide a very comprehensive network, so we don't just have these one-off trails and paths that don't connect anywhere. We want to provide a network so you can actually get around the city on your bike to the site, get home, etc. So that kind of answers the bikeway question. In terms of acquisition of right-of-way on Dowling Avenue, we do not have any immediate plans to take away any right-of-way. There's a lot of costs associated with that, a lot of disruption to property owners. Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but as of now, we have no plans to take away right-of-way from any of the property owners over there. I think I answered all the questions, Eric. Did I miss anything, or Nathan, is there anything to add?
Let me drill down just for both. Maybe you can answer this, but also Nathan is I understand sometimes the city will acquire some right away. They'll widen the street a little bit. They'll impact houses. They'll impact properties, but they won't impact houses. So the question, I think, really to drill down is the city expecting to buy houses that are along Dowling in order to widen the street?
That is a no.
That's a no. Okay, very good.
Yeah, Eric,
Right.
the only thing, the most impact would be, other than just the construction of the street, sometimes to get the full construction of sidewalks, we do have to acquire some temporary easements in nature, but we're not exploring anything of expansion and getting into private properties, no.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to have some questions now for Brandon. And Brandon, we're getting into some of the details about the plan, specifically around the vision for housing on the site as it relates to a mixed income community. Can you talk a little bit more and kind of restate some of the things you've said already about what we're thinking about from an affordability standpoint, affordable rental units, homeownership opportunities, that sort of thing. And then the consideration of public housing. I know that's been asked for in the past, but I think we should talk about it a little bit here.
Sure. So again, the vision for the housing here is really to, I'm going to use the word mixed a lot, a mixed community, a mix of incomes, demographics, occupations, and then a mix of opportunities as well. And but an overarching theme is to provide housing here that will really have mechanisms in place that will provide priority and preference to current Northside residents or former Northside residents who maybe were displaced for various reasons. And so as it relates to the affordability strategy, as I mentioned, there was a request to provide provide over allocate the number of units that would be available at attainable incomes for Northsiders. And so, as I mentioned, in phase one, we are proposing about 277 total housing units. Out of those 277, 245 of them are proposed as affordable rental. And out of those 245, about 160 of those units, or roughly 66% of the phase one rental, will be provided the units will be provided at affordability levels that will be between 30 and 50% of area median income. And there was a question, I think, about project-based Section 8 and whether that's going to be provided. And yes, right now we're proposing to provide that. As I said, roughly 30% of the units, 80 of the units will be at that 30% AMI and would be available for project-based Section 8. And so, I mean, the goal from an income level is really to, provide a kind of a balanced community for, with a third of the units available for people at really lower incomes, a third for people that are in the kind of lower middle income, and then a third for people that are, upper affordable and or market rate. And so, but with phase one really focusing heavily on the deeper affordability. And then the question around the for sale homes. So we've got in phase one, 32 townhomes proposed, and another 15 proposed in phase two. So, roughly 47 home ownership opportunities. And, we've gone back and forth on this with the CPC and are still, finalizing what that affordability strategy those units could be. But I think it'll follow, close to what we're proposing for the rental. We'd like to see a mix of potentially perpetually affordable units, homeownership units, and that would require us partnering with a group that provides that. There's been some people who have said, well, we don't want perpetual affordability because that's, that limits. Yes, it's a limited equity program. You don't need to come up with any equity or, very limited amount, but your upside is limited. You don't get the full upside if the project does well. And so what we're really hoping is that we can, create kind of a mixed ownership community as well, with some perpetual affordability units as well as some market rate units. And I think if we determine that that's not possible, then we're going to err on the side of providing the affordable units, and would have to work with one or multiple partners that can help us achieve that.
All right, thank you, Brandon, for those answers. And I just want to do a time check for everybody. We're at about 6:30. We still have a couple more questions, so we're going to keep powering through those because I think people want to hear some answers, and we got the project team. It looks like we have about 3 or 4 questions left here. I'm going to queue up Hilary for a couple of things, but before I get there, Brandon, can you talk about the $3 ticket fee for the music venue really quickly, and does that increase over time with inflation?
Yes, I'll speak on behalf of First Avenue on this one, but it's my understanding that there will be mechanisms in place for inflation, for that to increase with inflation.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And one of the things that's, before I get to Hilary and ask some questions about some other funding that could come off of this project by virtue of the ground lease, there's a lot of questions that are being asked about the environmental review process. The environmental review, the question really is, people are asking, why are we getting this coordinated plan done before we've done the environmental review? Well, in all cases, when you're reviewing something, you need to know what you're reviewing, and the coordinated plan provides the city, who is the property owner, the permission of what to study. And so in this case, the city is going to undertake what's called an alternative urban area wide review, or an AUAR, and that scoping process will start in January. So Brandon had mentioned that you'll kind of see some of that, and that scoping will be subject to some public comment. And it's kind of like you need both of these things. The coordinated plan does not give permission and entitlements for the development to occur, but it sets the stage of what is going to be studied in that AUAR. And so that they kind of overlap in that sense. And that's why you saw in the timeline, the environmental reviews, this AUAR, would be done later this year, and then it would be after that time when we would have term sheets and go towards development reviews and city planning commission. So that's kind of why this is kind of overlapping, and the AUAR will test what's on the coordinated plan and look for any impacts that will need to be mitigated and strategies that will be mitigated. And it provides a guide for the city as a responsible government union in the development and the developer around how to mitigate those impacts. So those studies that Nathan mentioned and some things that Hilary talked about are components of that AUAR, among other things. And so that's kind of, it's confusing to a lot, especially if you're not around these development processes, but in all cases, environmental reviews, environmental assessments worksheet and environmental impact statement, all of those things occur when they're trying to study what the development would be. So, okay, Hilary, can you talk a little bit about the ground lease? We're not proposing not to sell a majority of this land and hold it in perpetuity in the city ownership. Can you talk about how that works and where those payments go?
Yes, happy to do so. So as far as the ground leases work, for those private development parcels that we had mentioned that would have the ownership retained by the city of Minneapolis and then leased to a developer as a long-term ground lease. Those ground leases to be financeable, the long-term typically means 99 years. So that would permit the developer to develop the piece of property, to make improvements on the property, to construct the development, and then would be paying through annual ground lease payments the city for the use of that land. What the city and the development team and the collaborative planning committee are recommending to the city council as part of that ownership structure, we'll say, is that those annual ground lease payments be earmarked in a special enterprise fund to be established by the city council. Since some of the community priorities that have been discussed through this process and are highlighted, and a lot of this work in the plan are focused on anti-gentrification and anti-displacement efforts in North Minneapolis. It's been proposed that those funds could be dedicated towards those efforts. The Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative, or sorry, the Upper Harbor Terminal Community Entity that's been discussed could make recommendations on the distribution of those funds, make recommendations to the city on the distribution of those funds for more specific, efforts of the kind of overall topics I mentioned, anti-gentrification and anti-displacement. So I believe that is the answer to that question.
Thank you. I'm just looking through the questions here. Hold on. So we got a follow-up question about combating gentrification, and I'm going to ask Markella if she to be prepared to talk as well here. Displacement in Minneapolis is a real problem throughout the city, and North Minneapolis is experiencing it without development on the Upper Harbor because of the economics of the world that is happening. And the specific question I think is that I'm seeing is around 30% AMI and housing for those under 30% AMI. In the larger sense, buildings such as public housing buildings require a lot of substantial support. That's and so the mixed income approach has this considering how to make this attainable and affordable for current Northside residents. And I see I think there's an efficiency unit would have a rent of $543. And the developer and the development team are working on how to make the project work, because ultimately 100% a building that's 100% affordable at 30% is nearly impossible to get financed, and does not it requires operational support ongoing, and so the proposal that we see in front of us is around having some mixed income, and the CPC has talked about having mixed income and a mixed income community, as Brandon has talked about. But in general, this displacement question, what are we trying to do to disrupt it and disrupt gentrification? I always look at, who benefits, and the CPC has done a good job of identifying the community and who we need to put forward, making sure that American descendants of slavery are highlighted, and we are considering how to make sure that those benefits occur for them. We're looking at financial mechanisms like like Hilary talked about with the ground lease payments, and how the ticket fee comes off, ownership opportunities, putting affordable housing on the river in the coveted spot, working with the park board to make sure that there's access to the river. So those are the things that I think about, but I want to give Markella some time to just, to share, her thoughts about this, and what she sees with the coordinated plan in this development, and I think we'll give her the last word.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I think this is a really good question, and it's something that has came up during the CPC meetings over and over and over again. And I think one of the important things that I want to point out, and that the CPC specifically fought hard for, is the one, including the 30% AMI, but also the fact that this development, the first phase of it, is 65% at 50% AMI or less. that's a huge portion of this phase one of this development that is affordable. And we know that there are absolutely people on the north side who make less than 30%. But I feel like pushing for this 30% and then pushing for 65% of this development being 50% AMI or less is a huge win. Because we want to see mixed income, we want to see mixed occupations, we want to see all of these things, but we also, more importantly, want to see it be affordable for current Northsiders. So we've pushed for that. It's been a huge, huge, huge amount of conversation amongst CPC members during our meetings, outside of our meetings. But I think that having that amount of the development in phase one be 65% is huge. And then as far as disrupting gentrification, I want to take a moment to just reiterate that these ground lease payments that are coming in from these properties and in this development could go towards disrupting gentrification. It could go towards things like taxes. It could go towards things like property management. You know, when someone owns a property and they can't afford to get their water heater fixed, or flooding happens, usually you have to jump through all of these hoops. But if there is something in place that can help homeowners in those aspects, it's a way that we can keep people in their homes without having them just be displaced because they can't afford to get something fixed, or they can't afford taxes, or they can't afford something else. But having those ground lease payments to go to something that can help homeowners, I think is a huge way that we're addressing the gentrification and displacement. And again, it's something that CPC members, we've been fighting for this. We've been fighting to make sure that this disruption doesn't happen, especially on such a large scale that we've seen before. And then also, I want to point out one other thing, and sorry, then I'll quit talking, is that one of the recommendation points that the CPC has put forth is basically that there's a really huge effort to make sure that people who have been displaced from North Minneapolis, right? We've got the tornado, we've got redlining, we've got the housing crisis, we've got all these things that have happened, and we know that it has hugely affected the Black community within North Minneapolis, right? One of the recommendations that we put forth is that there is a huge effort to bring those people back in whatever way, whether it's through affordable housing, whether it's through home ownership, whether it's through owning townhomes, businesses. We want to make sure that people who have been displaced from North Minneapolis previously have a chance to come back. And we've also pointed out that maybe not everyone that has been displaced before is coming back at an affordable housing level. Maybe they make more than that now. Maybe they make more than the 70% AMI. So having this mixed amount of income housing helps bring people back on all levels. Because we want to see people there that have been displaced from 20 years ago, from 10 years ago. We want to see everybody come back. And we want to build on that community and make it just amazing. Sorry, I feel like that was really long-winded. And I hope that it answered the questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Markella. That was not long-winded in my mind, and I'm speaking from experience. So thank you. So we've got to the end of the questions. You know, there some questions we might have received that have to be researched a little bit. We'll write those out. They'll be put up on our website, and we'll have an FAQ up there as well. You see on the slides in front of you the process. The comment period ends in 10 days. You can review the plan, and I really encourage people to read the plan. That's where all the information is, and comment on it. We've had a lot of folks on this call, but dozens other spent the last almost 2 years now working on it, and we'd really like you to take a look at it and give us your feedback. And you can respond to us through the Upper Harbor Minneapolis mpls.com website. And then you see some of the upcoming events, including the UROC event on Saturday and some some with the McKinley community and Marshall Terrace neighborhoods as well. So all of the details on those events are also on our website. And then we will be updating you very shortly on the events around public infrastructure and the public realm and how that engagement will be being rolled out. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight's open house and participating in this important project. And I hope you a very happy new year, and I hope that 2021 is a much more positive and fulfilling year than 2020 was. Have a good night.